What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to Homicidal Tea with Ranee B. Today we are going to be talking about the case of Jessica Dishon. She was a 17-year-old girl from Shepherdsville, Kentucky. It's about 20 miles north, I believe, of Louisville, Kentucky. And she if we're here, it's not usually a good story. So hopefully that you guys enjoy it. And if this is an actual literal, get ready with me because I'm about to go to Easter dinner. So I did my makeup beforehand and thought, hey, why not cover a case while I'm getting ready? So hope you guys have a great Easter, and thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. That helps me extremely, and we won't take any more time away from the case. We'll get right to it. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video. Jessica Dishon was born on May 2nd, 1982. She lived in a farming town about 20 miles south of Louisville in Kentucky. She shared a home with her younger brothers and her parents, Edna and Michael. Now, on September 10th, 1999, Jessica's mom, Edna, came home around 1 p.m. and Jessica's car was still in the driveway. And Edna thought that was strange because Jessica should have been at school until about 2:30 p.m. Worried, Edna went out to search her car. And inside of her car was her cell phone, her purse, her backpack, and one of her shoes. That's weird. Her cell phone was one of those old Nokia type cell phones, the kind that you could like hurl across the room and not break, or hurl at your boyfriend. I never did that. I was not that violent anyway. But it's the kind that when you dialed a number and you put it in, that the screen it didn't have a screensaver, and it didn't come on, and it didn't go blank like the LCD or the OLEDs or whatever kind of LEDs, the screens that they have now. And it was one of those liquid crystal screens that would keep whatever that you were doing up. Whenever you would power off and you just like hit it to turn it back on, it would show what you were dialing last time. And the screen said 9-1, as in 911. And that escalated the fear in Edna. So she called the school to see if that Jessica ever showed up. She did not. When her parents couldn't locate her at the school, they called the police to report her as a missing persons. But they said they needed to wait one more day and that they could come back the next day and fill out a missing persons report. And they did just that. And that's when the search for Jessica began. Now, at first, police just believed it was a straight runaway case. They came out and Jessica's family said that there was no way that was a possibility because her belongings that were in her car, she wouldn't leave. And she wouldn't leave her family either. She was extremely close with her family. Her mother, her father, her brothers, her uncle, and then extended family. And so that's not really even a possibility. But the police began the search by looking through her car. They didn't even wear gloves. They were just rummaging through it. And they had no leads or suspects. And at this point, other family members and friends were at the Dishon house as well. Michael's brother, Stanley, he lived with them for a while when the kids were little, and he was extremely close with them. So it was like a second father. Stanley, Jessica's uncle, had made an observation that if it was any place that someone would go do anything illegal, it was definitely at the creepy river bottoms. So that's where they started. Obviously, everyone was upset. Many search party members were holding back tears and having to take breaks, compose themselves. It was a really emotional time for everybody. But Stanley, Michael's brother, actually became so physically ill that he had to be taken home. He couldn't continue. Their family was very close. And it was just taking a toll on everyone that they were trying to find her. They couldn't find her in the brush or the craggy landscapes of the river bottoms, but they came up empty. At this point, the Dishon family, they felt like that the local sheriff's department just wasn't working as hard as they should have. And so that's when Michael Dishon had the idea to reach out to the FBI. And the FBI told them that either the responding agency or the parents would have to be the ones to invite them in. And Michael did just that. So when the FBI came out to search, they searched Jessica's car, of course, and they impounded it like they should have in the first place. They let potential evidence just sit out for weeks and weeks, and being all sorts of contamination being part of it. So they questioned everyone that was known to Jessica, and they established a concrete timeline of her last known movements. Still, there was no sign of her anywhere. There was a moment later on, though, when Jessica's brother burst into the kitchen, and he said that he thought he had heard Jessica screaming for help. Michael ran to the bedroom to get his gun because he was ready to kill anyone who might have been involved with his daughter's disappearance. He made that very clear the entire investigation. But Stanley, he had been walking up just to the house to just check and see if anybody had heard anything. And he said, I'll gladly go with you because they were both ready to kill. But when they got to the edge of the property, they saw their neighbor, David Bucky Brooks, burning things in a burn barrel. That's kind of weird. Apparently, that's a thing that a lot of rural areas do, so it's not that big of a deal. But as neighbors, they were not friendly at all. So, actually, it even came out later in the case that Bucky had even called Michael pretending to sound like Jessica, saying, please don't kill me, please find me, I'm lost, and then hanging up. I mean, the guy was a real piece of work. 17 days after Jessica disappeared, a bus driver called 911. She said she saw what looked like a body near the river bottoms where she was driving her usual route. The police rushed to the scene, and they did in fact find the body of a female propped up against a tree. It was along the Salt River, just about 7 miles from where Jessica lived. The pants were pulled down halfway, and there was a rope that had traces of red, silver, and gray paint all in it. And that was wrapped around her leg. The detectives went out to the home of Jessica's family and broke the news to them that they'd found their daughter, but still they had to have someone go and ID the body, and the mother was the one who had to do that, poor Edna. And the way that she did it was a butterfly tattoo because she was that unrecognizable, and decomposition had taken that much of a toll on her poor little body. But the autopsy found that Jessica's cause of death was strangulation. And they'd done a rape kit, but it didn't have a whole lot of information that was in it. They couldn't discern much. They just believed that she'd been sexually assaulted because of the way that her clothes were found. Jessica's clothes were tested, and forensics couldn't find anything definitive that could prove that she'd been sexually assaulted. So that was still questionable. But the autopsy did find that Jessica was probably killed around 3 days after she'd been abducted. Now, after the news was given to the family, investigators, they leapt into action. The next step of the investigation was to canvass all surrounding properties and to start really asking the hard questions. They didn't have a suspect per se, but they had people of interest. And one of those people was Bucky Brooks next door. And the police were suspicious when they questioned David Brooks because he was a 40-year-old farm worker. He said that he saw Jessica the day that she disappeared. He later changed his story and said that he saw Jessica by her car. But then he said no, he saw her walking down the road. And he changed his story too much. So that was enough for investigators to come out and search the adjacent property by air and by land. And they still had absolutely nothing. However, when they were searching a barn next door, they did find some gloves that had the smell of decomp on them. Some of the scent dogs picked up on that. And they also found a picture of Jessica. And that was kind of strange too. So they went over and they confronted him. And they also searched a van that David drove. And the rope, similar to what was found on Jessica, was found in the van. So the police asked David where he was that day. And he said he'd been at work. But when the police tried to confirm this, they couldn't find anyone to corroborate his story. So there were several witnesses that also said they saw David's van on the road that Jessica was found. And that was just days leading up to her discovery. So, well, that was enough for investigators. They believed what they had was enough probable cause to issue an arrest warrant for David Bucky Brooks. He was arrested and taken into custody. Now, I'm going to interrupt myself because this stuff is called Undone, and it's amazing. All it is supposed to be a self-tanning kind of thing, but it's water-based, and I use it for blush and contouring, and it's amazing. So anyway, back to the story. 16 months after the day that Jessica disappeared, the trial started, and this was in January of 2003. Prosecution was seeking the death penalty, and Jessica's family was extremely happy because they really did feel that they had found the right guy. However, their case fell apart. The lead investigator had said David Brooks became a suspect because he'd failed some of the checks and balances that the officers had given them. Well, okay. The defense attorney did exactly what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to rattle that witness, badger them until they got all emotional and frustrated and blew up. And that's exactly what happened. We all know that polygraphs are not admissible in court, and David had actually taken many polygraphs. 2 were inconclusive, and 4 showed signs of deceit. But when they incessantly questioned the sheriff's department investigator on this case, they said, "Why did you suspect Bucky? Why did you think he did it? Is this a witch hunt? Are you even competent?" Over and over and over. The investigator just belted out, "He failed the polygraph." This is a little case law study for you folks. When a person is on trial and the probable cause warrant that was used to obtain a search or whatever was from the findings of a polygraph, that probable cause warrant is only good if the words polygraph, lie detector are never used in court. Ever. Both sides know this. Both sides know that they got the probable cause warrant because of the lie detector test. They know that. That's just something that lawyers know. But the thing is that the public does not understand how lie detector tests work and how they actually run them and how the findings are really to be read and stuff. And normal people can't deduce reasoning or reasonable doubt from those tests or lack thereof. You just don't know enough about them. So at that point, mistrial. Well, at that point, it was a mistrial. David Brooks was dismissed as a free man. The prosecution, they handed over all the evidence boxes containing every single bit of evidence, including like samples from the scene that were supposed to be refrigerated and or frozen that were clearly marked on the box, keep frozen, that were not. They were left at rot. They were literal body parts that were left out to rot. And it was just ridiculous. The case was just so bungled to begin with. But they just handed over those boxes to the family, said, "Here," and it was quite more than evident Bucky would never get charged for this murder ever again. At that point is when Jessica's case would go cold for more than 13 more years. Now, I don't know about y'all. I'm pretty sure that most of y'all feel this way, but there's a lot of times in your life, even more than one, that shit gets real and stuff gets hard. And it's almost like out of the heavens parts the clouds and somebody comes to save you. It's like, I can't even really explain it. It's just, it seems like when the times get so dark and you can look back and you can remember that one person that came unexpectedly and changed everything. Well, for this case, that person was Detective Lynn Hunt. And she was hired on as a new investigator, and she was taking on the cold cases. So she had received a call from her old colleague, Gary Huffman. And Gary Huffman was the detective at the Louisville Metro Police Department. And Gary had worked on with a lot of convicted felons. And he would question them to see if they had heard anything or admitted crime or blah, blah, blah. You know how they get into their little cells and they talk to each other like girlfriends. Well, at this point, he said that an inmate told him that he knew exactly who killed Jessica Dishon. Well, Lynn Hunt was familiar with this case. This was one of the most famous cases in Shepherdsville. The inmate said the killer was Stanley Dishon, Jessica's uncle. He said Stanley killed Jessica because she told him that she was no longer going to keep a secret. His secret was that he had been molesting her since she was a little girl, even when he lived in their home with her. Well, she got a new boyfriend. She started telling her boyfriend about all the abuse, and her boyfriend was getting pissed about it. He was like, "You need to turn him in." Well, Stanley was at this point still trying to rape Jessica, and Jessica wasn't having it anymore. No, no ma'am. The police believed the inmate because this person knew so much about this case, and Stanley Dishon was already in prison for assaulting other minors, including his own stepdaughters. Yikes. But Jessica, when she was leaving for school, supposedly this inmate said that he took her to an abandoned barn. and that Stanley had kept her there for 3 days and tortured her and eventually strangled her. Well, remember the autopsy report? What did it say? It said that she had been alive for 3 days after her disappearance. I mean, how could he have known that unless he was telling the truth? Detectives Lynn Hunt and Gary Huffman, they believed this inmate because he knew too much information and all the evidence matched. And he had no way of doing it because he was doing time on a different thing. He was in a different place. They ruled him out. But there was also another inmate that had come forward who had the same story. But then get this, that was already in the case file. Whenever Lynn was going through the case file, she found all these notes that had interviews with inmates that had told them, oh, guess what? I know about this case, and it was Stanley Dishon. It was never given to the prosecution. It should have been. And actually, it was the defense that had had all this. Well, the defense also had something else. Bucky Brooks took an IQ test. He scored a 67. That polygraph test should have never even been administered. He didn't even understand what he was taking. He couldn't understand the gravity of the situation, much less whether or not, these answered questions would lead to an arrest warrant. He didn't understand that. So the probable cause warrant that they issued based on these tests was from a lie detector test that should have never happened. So, yeah. Well, this was all enough for them to issue an arrest warrant for Stanley Dishon, and that's exactly what they did. Michael Ferguson, the new prosecutor, told the inmates that they would not get a deal of any kind if they were to testify. And to further prove that Stanley killed Jessica, Detective Lynn Hunt and Jessica's brother went to the area where Jessica had been found. Now, supposedly from these inmates, they had said that Stanley had buried these extra items that would link, like the other shoe and whatnot, and that they had buried all sorts of like little just trinkets. You know how serial killers are. You know how killers period are. They like their little trophies. They think they're slick or whatever. Well, they dug. She said in the documentary that I saw, she said that she had dug about 175 holes and it was pouring rain. It was just miserable. And finally they said, you know what? Yeah, we're done. We're done. We tried. And it was her and her brother, her and Jessica, Detective Hunt and Jessica's brother. And whenever they got in the truck, they were headed back to the Dishon house. And and her brother had just casually pointed to a barn they were passing and saying, oh yeah, that's the barn we used to party at. What? Remember that inmate? He said that was where they kept some things. So when they went inside, they found a bed sheet that was buried in the dirt, but it was still kind of sticking out underneath some brush. Well, they were freaked out. They grabbed it, and in the interview, they said that they'd driven back probably at like 100 miles an hour. Like, they were so excited to see if it matched the pattern on Jessica's bed because they hadn't changed anything since the day that Jessica went missing. So her bed was still there, her sheets were still there, everything. Well, they pulled back that comforter. There was no fitted sheet, and the pattern was a match. It was the exact same from the day she disappeared.
Evidence discovered in the Jessica Dishon murder investigation. Prosecutors believe this evidence, a sheet found in a Bullitt County barn, will lead to the conviction of 55-year-old Stanley Dishon for his niece's murder.
So when the police interviewed Stanley Dishon, he refused to even confess. He said to the police, I don't know what you're talking about, but he was like visibly nervous, shaking. And the police wanted more to convict him, though, that they found that Stanley had actually abused more young girls, and they were relatives even. But at the trial, Stanley Dishon took what is called an Alford plea. I think we've talked about Alford pleas before here and if we haven't, and forgive me if I've told this story before, that there was a woman walking her dog, and I asked her dog what her dog's name was, and she said, it was Alfred, and I said, oh, like the Alford plea. Gosh. And I remember just thinking, what a weirdo. I hope she doesn't know what that means. She didn't, so it's all cool. But he did take an Alford plea, and that's basically where a defendant says, okay, they've got enough evidence to screw me, but I didn't do it. But I'm just gonna take the deal because it looks really bad, and I'd rather just take the deal than risk my chances in court. So that's what he did. At the trial, Michael, Jessica's father, he confronted Stanley, and he just stared right back at him while Michael broke down. He said that he let him into his home, and is this how you repay me, really? Stanley just was a stone. He just sat there, didn't even flinch or didn't cry or didn't apologize or anything. But Michael got to at least get out what he needed to say. I don't know if that helped him at all, but I certainly hope that it did, because it was in March of 2015 that Stanley Dishon was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And Michael Dishon said Stanley confronts them and tries to contact them, constantly saying that he didn't do it. And Michael says that he knows he's lying, because why else would he have taken a plea deal, especially something like that, and especially with his history with the other, poor kids that he molested and abused. I mean, there's so many little young lives that he took, and that's the thing about sexual abuse that people really don't seem to talk about much, is that it changes these people forever. Like, it changes the way that they see relationships. They're exposed to sexuality way too soon, and they don't know how to process these feelings. They don't know that they're supposed to feel certain ways, and that this sexual activity is supposed to be felt between the, consent and, happiness between two people, and that it's a choice and it's not forced. And so that coercion and that horrific, just perverted sense of what love is to these kids, it changes who they are, and it changes them, hopefully not forever, but for a long time. These little girls don't know what a healthy relationship is now because of this man. Like, they're living their own life sentences. The memorial or headstone for Jessica is just absolutely beautiful, and I'll insert that picture. And unfortunately, I hope that her parents were able to receive some sort of closure and just to move on. It took a toll on Michael and Edna's marriage, and they eventually, separated and divorced. And that's what Michael says, is that now, he lost a daughter, he lost a wife, he lost his family, he lost a lot. And this was all due to somebody he called his brother. It's just sad and just tragic all the way around. There's no words for it. And he abused multiple people. He ruined many families. And he went on to kill Jessica because she finally stood up to him, and that he was let into these families' home, and he just screwed up so many people because they trusted him. And they say that people that commit crimes against children and women and of sexual natures get worse treatment in prison. I sure hope that's true, because he deserves to get his ass beat every single day, and even worse things to his ass, because he just left a legacy of people bobbing in his wake that nobody deserves. And I think it's just really sad that these families had to endure such hell and such fear and the unknown, and just they experienced so much loss at the hands of this one man. And I certainly hope that karma's coming around for him, and he doesn't feel safe, and that he doubts his surroundings, and that he doesn't understand why the world is so cold now to him. I hope that it's actually taking a toll on him. And one thing that I didn't even talk about is David Brooks. Dude, the whole town turned against him. Like, everybody thought he did it, and it looked bad. I wonder if Stanley planted that picture, because you never heard anything else about the picture that was in David Brooks' barn, or those gloves with decomp on them. I wonder if, like Stanley, whenever he just happened to rock up, whenever they were about to go, confront whomever was, doing help me, who made the sound that her brother had heard when he was feeding the dogs that night that he thought he heard Jessica. Was Stanley over there planting evidence? Did Bucky Brooks have anything to do with it? Did he help help him because Jessica was 17. She was the size of an adult. So could Stanley's emaciated, meth-looking ass had done that, moved her by himself? Did Bucky Brooks help her? Maybe not. I mean, like, who knows? But I mean, I do feel bad for him because let's just say that justice was served, and if the right man is convicted, which we have to put our faith in the justice system because if not, it's a weird time to be saying that because police are just so messed up lately, but not all of them. So that being said, but like Bucky Brooks was facing the fucking death penalty. So you know what? Actually, you know what he said? He had come out and said, "I don't feel bad about anything. I'm not mad at anybody, and people make mistakes, and I'm just sorry that Jessica got murdered, and that's sad." I would have been like, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. Fuck you. I'm out." It's a little shout out to my half-baked. Anyway, and I also had to be cathartic for those women. Even though he took that Alfred plea and they didn't have to go to trial, they still brought up charges against him. Anyway, those girls got to actually finally tell their story and they got to just release it. And I hope that peace comes to them because that's got to absolutely be horrific. And then to be able to confront your abuser and then be a part of him coming to justice over murdering a little innocent victim, then that had to feel good for them. So I hope that they do have some solace with that. And I believe, and I'm filming this on Easter, so this is actually a real get ready with me because I'm on my way to Easter dinner with the in-laws. And a lot of people would be like, "Oh God, your in-laws." No, dude, I get along with them fine. We're all perfect. I love it. It's awesome. It's a party for sure. So, but today's Easter, so I mean, I love doing my blue lipstick and my green lipstick. So if it's not, I mean, that's probably passe. I don't care. Like I said in my other videos, if you like it, you want to rock it, then you do it. So here we go. A little bit of green, spring. I'll mix in with the little mauve that I've already done, and just a subtle shimmer. Please like and subscribe. That tells me that you guys like the videos. Please comment and let me know these are too long or these are too short, or just your comments and the analytics that I see on the YouTube Creator app. It really helps me tailor the times and the times that the viewership drops off or the times that the viewership stays through the whole way. It really helps me to know what kind of content to keep putting on to keep you guys entertained because this is fun for me and I want it to be fun for you guys too. So I'll see you in the next video real soon, and that's it. Thank you.